The Imperial War Council chamber vibrated with the low, constant thrum of power conduits buried deep within the Capitol spire. Warm air carried the sharp scent of heated alloys and ceremonial resin, a smell every Vorth associated with expansion, with victory. Beyond the curved crystal dome, the night side of the Capitol world shimmered with shipyard lights, thousands of vessels under construction, their engines flaring like newborn stars. Archivist Thren stood alone at the center projection dais, his narrow frame almost fragile against the towering figures surrounding him. Armor plates shifted and clicked as admirals settled into their positions. Weapons officers whispered tactical probabilities. Conquest was expected tonight. Above them, Emperor Krall's holographic throne resolved into full solidity. His massive form leaned forward, for eyes fixed on Thren. "Your report," the Emperor said. Thren's hands moved across the archive controls. The chamber darkened. Stars appeared. A fleet materialized, immense, perfectly ordered, the pride of a long-dead empire. Tactical markers glowed along its formation. Confidence radiated from the geometry alone. Then the markers began to fail. No explosions. No enemy fire. Engines died first. Formation broke. One ship drifted, then another, then dozens. Internal systems collapsed in cascading silence. The once mighty armada became a graveyard of powerless hulls tumbling through vacuum. A murmur spread through the council. Then the second wave appeared. Not warships. Small human vessels emerged from translation. Cargo ships, medical transports, civilian haulers painted in bright identification bands. They moved slowly, deliberately, attaching guidance rigs, towing disabled ships, broadcasting rescue signals. "They are salvaging them," one admiral said. "Rescuing them," Thren corrected quietly. The attacking fleet lost operational capacity within 42 hours. No decisive battle occurred. Within 8 standard years, the empire that launched the attack fragmented and dissolved. The hologram shifted. Another fleet. Another empire. Another collapse. Different methods. Same outcome. Silence settled, heavy and uncomfortable. Admiral Vare stepped forward, his armor scraping sharply against the floor. "Correlation is not causation," he said, voice carrying easily. "These cases show systemic weakness in our predecessors, not strength in the humans." He gestured dismissively at the projections. "They lack centralized command. Their fleets are inconsistent. Their military doctrine varies by region, even by culture. They are fragmented, politically divided, and inefficient." Vare turned toward the Emperor. "Soft prey. Disorganized prey." Several commanders nodded. The projections faded, leaving only the glow of the Capitol world beyond the dome. Thren kept his voice steady. "Every species that has described humans as disorganized did so shortly before losing strategic cohesion." Emperor Krall rose slightly from his throne. The movement alone silenced the chamber. "Our intelligence," the Emperor said slowly, "indicates a newly established human frontier system. Minimal defenses. High concentrations of rare matter. No central fleet presence." A new hologram appeared, an unremarkable star, surrounded by the skeletal beginnings of colonies and mining platforms. "Admiral Vare," Krall continued, "your strike plan." Vare's eyes gleamed. "Surprise, orbital suppression. Infrastructure elimination within 6 hours. Resource extraction secured within 3 cycles. Efficient. Clean. Certain." The Emperor nodded. "The operation is authorized." Around the chamber, armor plates clicked in approval. Fleet deployment orders began streaming across tactical displays. Conquest incense burned brighter. Only Thren did not move. He deactivated his presentation slowly, the darkness returning to the chamber's edges. No one looked at him anymore. Hours later, in a quiet archive chamber far below the council hall, Thren recorded a sealed entry. The only sound was the soft hum of data crystals spinning into alignment. "Directive override," he said. "Private historical annotation." He hesitated, looking at the casualty projections already populating the predictive models. Not battle losses. Structural collapse curves. Economic failure timelines. Political fracture probabilities. He finished the entry in a low voice. "If they proceed, this will not be a war." The archive crystal locked with a soft click. Thren looked up at the live fleet deployment feed, thousands of Vorth ships accelerating toward the human frontier. It will be a lesson. And far beyond the capital system, the invasion fleet crossed the translation threshold and vanished into human space. The alarm didn't sound like a siren. It was 3 calm chimes over the colony network, followed by a woman's voice, steady and almost conversational. Unidentified high-velocity contacts detected at system edge. This is a Level 2 readiness notification. All residents proceed to assigned coordination stations. Maya Alvarez wiped conductive dust from her hands and looked up from the mining rig's open control panel. Level 2. Not a drill. For a moment, the vast construction bay was silent except for the slow grinding of cooling machinery and the faint hum of the colony's fusion spine. Then everything moved at once. "Okay, you heard it," called Jalen from the catwalk. "Evac teams Alpha and Beta, prep transports. Engineering, we're on conversion priority." No shouting, no panic, just motion. Maya climbed down from the rig, her boots hitting the metal floor with a hollow clang. Through the open bay doors, she could see the sky, thin atmosphere, pale stars, and the distant glint of orbital traffic already shifting patterns. Unknown ships at the edge. She felt the fear arrive, cold and sharp, but it didn't freeze her. It settled somewhere behind her ribs and stayed there, quiet and useful. Because there was work to do. Her wrist display lit automatically. Role assignment updated. Structural engineering / defensive conversion team secondary. Civilian evacuation coordination. Figures, she muttered. A teenager sprinted past carrying a crate of emergency seals. Behind him, the colony schoolteacher was arguing with a security officer over cargo mass limits. On the overhead screens, civilian traffic lanes reorganized themselves into evacuation corridors. No one was waiting for orders from Earth. No one expected them. Maya keyed into the engineering channel. "This is Alvarez. Confirm we're doing the ugly thing." Jalen's voice came back immediately. "Yeah, mining rigs go from profit to problem. We're turning them into orbital denial." Maya looked back at the massive drilling platform she'd spent 2 years optimizing for efficiency. "Well," she said quietly, "sorry, old girl." Then she grabbed a plasma cutter and got to work. By the time the sun dipped behind the colony's horizon ridge, the town hall was standing room only. Farmers in dust-stained suits stood beside lab technicians still wearing sterile gloves. Mechanics, teachers, medics, survey pilots, cooks, children. 3,000 people packed into a space designed for 500. The meeting wasn't being run by a governor. There wasn't one. At the front of the room stood a rotating panel. Maya from engineering, Captain Idris from local security, Dr. Chun from the medical cooperative, and Lila Torres, who technically ran the grocery distribution network but had somehow become the colony's unofficial logistics brain. The air smelled like sweat, machine oil, and recycled oxygen pushed past comfortable limits. Maya glanced down at her tablet. Orbital estimates scrolled across the screen. Unknown ships still inbound. Too fast. Too quiet. No response to hails. Not pirates, then. Something organized. She stepped forward. "Okay," she said, voice amplified through the hall speakers. "Here's where we are." The crowd quieted instantly. "We've got unidentified military-grade signatures entering the outer system. Best case scenario, they're scouting. Worst case, they're not stopping." A murmur moved through the room. Fear, but controlled, contained. "We've already started evacuation priority," Lila added. "Children, medical cases, and non-essential personnel will be off-world within 30 hours if traffic holds." Someone raised a hand. "And if traffic doesn't hold?" Captain Idris answered that one. "Then we make sure the lanes stay open." No bravado. Just fact. Maya looked out at the faces in front of her. People she'd eaten with. Worked beside. Argued with over air quotas and water usage and festival planning. Her chest tightened. Because the next part mattered. "We don't have fleet support," she said. "Closest response time from Earth is too long. Which means this colony is the delay." Silence. Everyone understood. If something hostile arrived, their job wasn't to win. Their job was to make the system expensive enough, complicated enough, slow enough, that help could reach everyone else. Dr. Chin stepped forward with a tablet. "We're opening a vote. Option 1, full evacuation. Abandon infrastructure, scatter to nearest safe ports." A pause. "Option 2, Maya said quietly, we hold. Engineers, pilots, security, volunteers. We convert the rigs, the cargo mass drivers, anything we've got. We buy time. The vote went live across every wrist display in the colony. Maya didn't look at the numbers at first. She watched the people instead. Parents leaning toward each other. Old miners nodding before they even checked. A group of teenagers grinning like this was some kind of terrible adventure. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't courage. This was choice. The results came in. Option 2, 78%. A long breath left the room. Maya swallowed, stepped closer to the mic. "We don't fight because we're strong," she said. She hadn't planned the words. They just came. "We fight because someone has to come home." No cheering, just nods. Then the room broke into motion. Teams forming, names being called, equipment lists updating in real time. Decision made. Work began. In orbit, the captured Dominion reconnaissance probe watched everything. It had been snared 3 hours earlier by a maintenance drone and brought into a fabrication bay. Human technicians had opened its casing carefully, almost respectfully, then routed its passive sensors into the colony network. They knew it was watching. They left it watching. Through its optical feeds, the probe recorded civilians in construction exosuits reinforcing shield housings. It recorded children being loaded onto transports while their parents stayed behind. It recorded scientists rewriting mining algorithms to calculate projectile trajectories. No central command node. No military perimeter separating combatants from non-combatants. Every human was doing something different. Every human was moving toward the same goal. The probe's behavioral analysis routines attempted classification. Population type, civilian population type, industrial population type, military. The categories failed. Below, on the surface, Maya guided a massive drilling arm into a new alignment, converting it from extraction mode into a crude but powerful mass accelerator. Her muscles ached. Her hands were shaking. She was afraid. Of dying. Of failing. Of the empty homes that might be left behind. But beneath the fear was something steadier. They weren't waiting for rescue. They weren't waiting for orders. They were buying time for strangers they would never meet. Above the colony, evacuation ships lifted in a steady stream, engines burning bright against the dark. At the edge of the system, the first Dominion signatures crossed the outer marker. And instead of a panicked, leaderless settlement, they were about to meet a population that had already decided what it was willing to sacrifice. The Chamber of the Galactic Intelligence Consortium was built for distance. Distance between species. Distance between emotions. Distance between decisions and consequences. Hundreds of observation tiers circled a vast hollow sphere, each section sealed behind its own environmental barrier. Methane fog drifted in one quadrant. Liquid suspension tanks glowed faintly in another. In the upper tiers, avian delegates perched along crystalline rails, feathers flickering with nervous light. At the center, a shared holographic volume displayed a single system. A young human colony. Mining infrastructure, orbital traffic, and, just beyond the outer marker, the advancing fleet of the Fourth Dominion. Session 44,882 is now active, announced the Neutral Adjudication Intelligence. Its voice carried simultaneously in 16 chemical, acoustic, and electromagnetic formats. Topic: Predictive analysis of human response to external aggression. Voting sigils appeared above each delegation, color-coded by stance. Observe, intervene, withdraw, sanction. Most already glowed observe. From a temperature-stabilized chamber near the lower ring, Archivist Thrin of the Fourth Dominion stood rigid, his presence as a non-voting observer marked by a thin amber outline around his projection. His empire had not requested this session. The galaxy had. At the center of the sphere, the Dominion fleet expanded into formation graphics, clean, hierarchical, precise. A second layer appeared beside it. Human activity. Thousands of independent signals. Civilian traffic rerouting. Mining platforms changing orientation. Local communications exploding in density. The patterns did not match any known mobilization doctrine. From the methane tier, a thick-bodied delegate of the Ra Collective pulsed a question. Clarification: where is the human command authority? The consortium intelligence paused. No centralized command structure detected. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, color shifts, pressure fluctuations, electromagnetic flickers of disbelief. From the avian tier, a sharp-voiced analyst spoke. Then the response is uncoordinated. Collapse probability increases. The central display zoomed in. Human evacuation lanes formed with mathematical efficiency. Orbital platforms repositioned into overlapping fields of fire. Civilian vessels clustered into defensive traffic corridors. Uncoordinated, but not chaotic. Thren watched the room's reactions carefully. Most species in the chamber came from hierarchical civilizations. Their wars were simple. Locate leadership, destroy command nodes, trigger surrender. The Dominion strategy assumed the same. It always had. The consortium intelligence shifted the display again. Historical overlays appeared. Empire after empire. Different species. Different eras. Each projection began the same way. A fleet entering human space. Each ended the same way. Fragmentation graphs, economic collapse curves, political disintegration timelines. From a liquid tank near the upper ring, the slow, resonant voice of a pelagic historian filled the chamber. Pattern identified. Human conflicts do not end at military defeat thresholds. The display showed a familiar sequence. Infrastructure destroyed. Urban centers damaged. Supply networks disrupted. In most civilizations, the next phase would be negotiation. In human cases, the response curve bent sharply upward instead. Civilian production surged. Decentralized manufacturing nodes appeared. Communication density increased. Resistance activity multiplied. They escalate after loss, the historian concluded. From the raw collective came a pulse of confusion. Why continue after strategic failure? Another delegate answered before the intelligence system could. Because humans do not define war as a military condition. The display shifted again. Images from past conflicts filled the sphere. Farmers operating weapons platforms, students running logistics networks, commercial corporations producing military hardware without state authorization. No clear boundary between civilian and combatant. No single structure to disable. The pelagic historian dimmed its lights in what its species used for unease. They convert society into a weapon. The chamber grew quieter. At the center, predictive models updated in real time. Dominion victory probability remained high in early engagement phases. Long-term stability projections did not. A red curve appeared beneath the Dominion emblem. Empire integrity risk, severe, 12-year horizon. In the lower tiers, discussion channels opened. From the avian delegation, recommend diplomatic pressure on Dominion. Risk extends beyond regional conflict. From the methane tier, objection. Human capability remains inconsistent across systems. Lack of standardization indicates weakness. Another voice joined. Mechanical, precise, from a machine symbiote civilization. Correction. Variability increases adaptation speed. Prediction error margins expanding. The chamber's voting sigils flickered as positions shifted. Observe. 63% intervene. 18% withdraw. 11% sanction. 8%. At the edge of the sphere, Thren requested private channel access. Permission granted. His projection shifted into a smaller, isolated window beside the delegation of the Lethari, an old, neutral species known for long memory and longer caution. Their representative appeared as a tall silhouette of layered light. You requested confidential communication, archivist, the Lethari said. Thren hesitated. Below them, the central display showed the Dominion fleet accelerating toward the human system. Human traffic increased. Civilian ships still launching. Still organizing. Still not surrendering. Our models assume collapse if their infrastructure is destroyed, the Lethari said gently. Your government shares this assumption. Thren's voice was quiet. That assumption is incorrect. The Lethari's light patterns shifted, attentive. Thren brought up one final archive layer, classified, Dominion internal analysis. Not shown to the full council. It displayed the same curve the consortium had generated, but extended further. Year 12, Year 15, Year 20. Dominion political stability probability fell below survivable thresholds. Economic autonomy loss. Peripheral rebellions. Trade isolation. Systemic failure. This is not military defeat, Thren said. This is structural erosion. The Lethari studied the data for a long moment. Then why proceed, they asked. Thren looked down at the central display. At the fleet. At the human colony still burning with activity instead of fear. Because, he said softly, They believe humans fight like everyone else. The Lethary's light dimmed. Will they surrender if the colony is destroyed? Thren's answer came without hesitation. No. He paused, then added the part that had kept him awake since the council session. Humans don't break. On the main display, the Dominion fleet crossed the system boundary. Human signals surged. Evacuation lanes tightened. Orbital platforms powered up. Thren watched the projections update again. Prediction uncertainty expanding. Outcome confidence dropping. They adapt, he said quietly. The Lethary's voice was almost a whisper. How fast? Thren looked at the data, then at the future curves no one wanted to believe. Faster than we can measure. The first strike lasted 11 minutes. From orbit, the Dominion fleet moved with clinical precision. Energy lances carved glowing lines across the surface of the frontier world. Mining complexes vanished in expanding spheres of vapor. Atmospheric processors ruptured in chains of white-hot detonations. The orbital platforms, once drilling stations turned makeshift defenses, fired a brief, desperate storm of mass-driver rounds before coordinated counterfire reduced them to drifting slag. Admiral Vare watched from the command deck as target icons turned from active to gray. Surface resistance eliminated, reported tactical control. Orbital infrastructure neutralized. No organized military response detected. Below, the colony burned. Cities were gone. Landing fields were gone. The primary fusion spine failed in a silent collapse that darkened half the hemisphere. Residual signals flickered across the tactical display. Thousands of small, scattered transmissions. Civilian frequencies. Emergency channels. Distress beacons. Vare studied them for a moment, then dismissed the layer. Resource survey teams will deploy when atmospheric conditions stabilize, he said. Proceed to Phase 2. To him, the operation was already over. On the far side of the system, the last evacuation convoy burned hard for deep space. Inside Transport Aurora, 17, Maya Alvarez sat strapped into a crash seat, her hands still shaking from adrenaline and smoke inhalation. Through the forward viewport, her homeworld shrank, its night side glowing with scattered fires. She had expected grief. Instead, what she felt was pressure. Urgent. Directional. Like something pushing outward through her chest. Her wrist console pulsed. Colony network. Emergency broadcast relay available. She hesitated only a second. Then she opened a channel. Her face appeared across dozens of civilian bands, mining networks, contractor frequencies, academic relays, and open human emergency protocols. Behind her, the viewport framed a burning planet. Her voice came out raw but steady. They hit the colony. Orbital strike. Infrastructure loss is total. She swallowed once. We're not victims. A pause. We're witnesses. Then she flagged the transmission for open distribution and hit propagate. The message left Aurora, 17, and entered human space. It did not travel along a single military network. It spread. Through commercial shipping relays. Through insurance risk channels. Through academic research nodes. Through private security contracts. Through hobbyist deep space antenna arrays maintained by people who just liked listening to the stars. On Earth, the message arrived in fragments. At Earth Defense Coordination, it triggered something older than any single command structure. There was no single alert tone. Instead, systems began changing priority levels. Civilian traffic algorithms shifted to emergency routing. Strategic material reserves flagged for conditional release. Independent contractor registries unlocked emergency clauses. A quiet line of text appeared across dozens of secured networks. External aggression confirmed, distributed response authorized. In the orbital traffic control sphere above Earth, an operator blinked as her display filled with new flight plans. Who ordered this?" she asked. Her supervisor leaned over. "No one," he said slowly. Across the system, ships began moving. Cargo haulers filed emergency conversion notices, logistics support / hazard operations. Deep space miners altered course. Private security fleets activated dormant contracts. Retired naval vessels powered up under civilian ownership. Volunteer registries lit up faster than servers could process them. Response times varied wildly. Some ships launched within minutes. Others needed hours to reconfigure cargo bays, swap software packages, or find crews. There was no formation, no central assembly point, no unified doctrine. But trajectories began to converge. At the Galactic Intelligence Consortium, analysts watched the map fill. Human signals multiplied across sectors. Vectors intersected. Clusters formed, dissolved, reformed. A raw observer pulsed uneasily. This is not a fleet. A machine symbiote analyst replied, correct. It is a population movement. The projected density curves climbed. Prediction models began widening uncertainty margins. Back in Dominion command space, the anomalies appeared 3 hours after the colony strike. Long-range sensors flagged increased traffic across multiple human systems. Not toward military shipyards, toward the frontier region. Vare studied the reports with mild irritation. Civilian evacuation spillover, he said. They are abandoning peripheral territories. His operations officer hesitated. Admiral, traffic patterns are inbound. Vare looked again. Thousands of signatures. Different drive profiles. Different hull classes. Different acceleration capabilities. Uncoordinated, but converging. He turned away. Proceed with Phase 3. Target industrial nodes within a 5-system radius. If they intend to reinforce, we will remove their production capacity. The order transmitted across the Dominion fleet. In human strategic databases, that order triggered something else. Wartime mobilization protocol. Escalation threshold reached. On Earth, priority systems shifted again. Strategic reserves unlocked fully. Civilian manufacturing licenses converted to emergency defense production. Autonomous fabrication networks retasked from commercial output. Insurance liability shields activated for volunteer combat support. Across the planet, factories did not wait for government contracts. They started making whatever the incoming ships said they would need. On Aurora, 17, Maya finished securing the broadcast equipment when a notification appeared on her console. Message distribution. 2.4 million relays confirmed volunteer response channels active. She stared at the numbers. Her hand stopped shaking. Behind her, the burning world finally slipped behind the curve of space. She whispered to no one. Okay. In the outer systems, the first wave of civilian ships crossed the halfway point. Some were armed. Most were not. All of them were coming. At the consortium, the human movement map had stopped looking like traffic. It looked like weather. At Dominion Command, new projections estimated contact windows shrinking by the hour. Admiral Vare authorized deeper strikes. More systems. More infrastructure targets. More pressure. On Earth, the mobilization index crossed a quiet internal threshold. Status updated. Distributed response phase. Active civilian convergence density. Increasing estimated operational mass. Growing. The numbers continued to climb. And for the first time, Dominion predictive models began showing something they had not accounted for. Not a fleet. Not an army. A swarm. And it was still getting larger. The first Human War Council did not take place in a bunker. It happened on a video call that kept crashing. 37 windows filled the screen. Military planners, logistics executives, software engineers, shipping union reps, 2 university researchers who had joined from a lab at 3 a.m, and a retired admiral whose microphone kept muting itself every time he leaned back. There was no single authority over the meeting. No formal command structure. Just a shared document labeled. Problem: Dominion Fleet Operational Superiority. Someone had typed beneath it. Goal: make their advantage irrelevant. Maya watched the call from the engineering deck of a converted cargo carrier, still en route to the frontier. She wasn't military. Most of the people on the call weren't either. That was the point. They're expecting fleet engagement, said a woman from strategic analysis. They're built for decisive battles. Command chains. Resource concentration. A logistics executive nodded. Then we don't fight their fleet. A cybersecurity lead leaned forward. We fight everything that keeps their fleet moving. The shared document updated rapidly. Targets: fuel supply chains, refinery control systems, navigation databases, financial settlement networks, predictive maintenance, AI, interstellar freight routing. Someone hesitated. That's not warfare. That's infrastructure collapse. The retired admiral finally got his microphone working. War isn't ships, he said. War is everything. Silence followed. Then the work began. In the Dominion refinery system of Keth-Lor, logistics officer Tarav was reviewing routine production reports when the first alert appeared. Output variance, 0.7%. Minor. Within acceptable tolerance. He approved the correction cycle. 30 minutes later, a second alert appeared. Combustion instability detected, batch 4412. Tara frowned. The refinery's automated chemistry control AI had adjusted fuel ratios to compensate for trace impurities in incoming raw material. That was normal. What wasn't normal was the cascade that followed. Reaction efficiency dropped. Stabilizers overcompensated. Temperature curves shifted just enough to avoid triggering safety shutdowns. Production continued. The fuel looked correct. It wasn't. 6 hours later, the first Dominion patrol vessel reported engine irregularities. Then 3 more. Then a carrier group. Diagnostics showed no sabotage. No foreign code. All refinery controls were operating within approved parameters. The problem was deeper. Weeks earlier, a human infiltration team had altered a minor calibration constant buried in a legacy chemistry module, an update that had passed Dominion validation because it optimized efficiency by 0.2%. Over time, it slowly destabilized long-term fuel integrity. Now, entire reserves were degrading in storage. Tariff stared at the growing list of affected depots as the scale became clear. Isolate Keflor production immediately, he ordered. The response came back. Isolation impossible. Contamination propagated through automated distribution network. Across Dominion space, ships began reporting fuel inconsistencies. At the Galactic Intelligence Consortium, observers watched the production graphs fall. This is not a fleet engagement, an analyst said quietly. No, replied the machine symbiote representative. This is metabolic failure. The attacks weren't limited to code. In the outer asteroid belts near the contested systems, human mining guilds had stopped extracting ore. They were moving rocks. Massive chunks of nickel iron were fitted with cheap guidance packages, stripped cargo thrusters, and improvised shielding. They weren't aimed at ships. They were aimed at traffic lanes. Dominion navigation AI, optimized for efficiency, began rerouting constantly to avoid unpredictable kinetic hazards. Shipping times doubled. Fuel consumption spiked. On Earth, a group of competitive strategy gamers ran open-source simulations using public Dominion performance data scraped from past encounters. Within 48 hours, they released optimized swarm interference models to volunteer fleets. Universities adapted the models into automated routing tools. Within days, civilian ships were moving in patterns specifically designed to overwhelm Dominion sensor prioritization systems. No single action was decisive. Together, they were exhausting. At a research campus in Luna orbit, graduate students designed a counter-algorithm that identified Dominion maintenance cycles. The tool spread through civilian networks in hours. Volunteer groups began timing minor harassment actions, signal noise, traffic congestion, drone interference, precisely when Dominion systems were most vulnerable to cascading delays. At Dominion Command, Admiral Vare received the first consolidated logistics report. Fuel reserves, unstable. Transit times, increasing. Maintenance backlog, rising. Operational readiness, declining across multiple sectors. Identify the attacking force, he ordered. There is no identifiable force, his intelligence officer replied. Instead, the display filled with thousands of small disruptions. Different origins, different methods, different timing. No central command signature. At the consortium, observers watched something new appear on predictive models. Human losses occurred regularly. Individual ships were destroyed. Harassment teams intercepted. Malware nodes purged. But the response rate never dropped. Every removed node was replaced. Every disrupted channel rerouted. This is statistically anomalous, the raw collective pulsed. The machine symbiote responded, incorrect. This is distributed redundancy. On Aurora, 17, Maya stood beside a sensor console as their cargo ship released a cluster of modified survey drones into a busy Dominion logistics corridor. The drones weren't weapons. They broadcast legal civilian traffic signals. Thousands of them. Within minutes, Dominion routing systems flagged the area as high-density navigation risk. Freight traffic slowed. Priority lanes rerouted. Delivery schedules slipped. Maya watched the confirmation light blink green. It felt small, almost pointless. But her console showed the aggregate effect. Across hundreds of systems, thousands of people were doing their own small, almost insignificant part. And the Dominion's operational curve was bending. At Dominion Command, Vare stared at the updated projections. There had been no major battle. No decisive defeat. But fleet readiness was dropping faster than combat losses could explain. He turned to his intelligence officer. Where is their command? The officer hesitated. We cannot identify one. At the consortium, the analysts reached the same conclusion. Humans weren't fighting a war. They were turning their entire civilization into friction. And no matter how many individual points the Dominion removed, the resistance never slowed. Admiral Vare did not consider the decision extreme. He considered it corrective. For weeks, Dominion projections had shown the same troubling trend. Operational efficiency falling, logistics strain rising, human interference multiplying faster than it could be eliminated. No decisive engagement. No central target. No way to force conclusion. Humans were not fighting a war. They were refusing to let it end. Their resistance depends on distributed industrial capacity, Vare said to the Strategic Assembly. If they cannot produce, they cannot adapt. A target sphere appeared above the table. Helios Delta system population, 11.2 million primary output, civilian fabrication, autonomous manufacturing, logistics routing hubs. No major fleet presence. No strategic weapons. Perfect. The objective is deterrence, Vare continued. We demonstrate that continued resistance results in unacceptable systemic loss. The weapon authorization glyph glowed red. Several officers hesitated. The stellar ignition array had been banned by multiple interstellar conventions after earlier catastrophes. It did not simply destroy infrastructure. It destabilized a star's outer layers. A controlled, localized flare. Temporary, in theory. Estimated casualties? One officer asked. Within acceptable wartime projections, Vare replied. He believed that. A single system lost now would prevent prolonged conflict later. Shock would force negotiation. Humans, like any species, would recognize the cost threshold. The ignition command transmitted. In the Helios Delta system, the star brightened. At first, astronomers thought it was a sensor error. Then the outer corona expanded. Energy output spiked beyond natural variability. Orbiting stations had 92 seconds of warning. The flare reached the inner worlds as a wall of radiation and plasma. Atmospheric ignition followed. Cities vanished in light. Communication networks went silent in under 3 minutes. The system did not explode. It simply died. On Earth, the first confirmation arrived 12 minutes later. At Earth Defense Coordination, no alarms sounded. Instead, a message appeared across every connected network. Helios Delta, signal loss cause, stellar event, artificial signature confirmed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Global Memorial Protocol activated. Not by government order. Automatically. Every public display switched to a single image, Helios Delta's star, captured from archival observation. Across cities, factories, orbital stations, ships, classrooms, and transit systems, human activity slowed. Then stopped. In New Delhi, traffic halted without instruction. In Lagos, construction cranes froze mid-lift. On Luna, fabrication lines powered down in sequence. No one had ordered a shutdown. No one needed to. On Aurora, 17, Maya was in the engine bay when the notification reached her visor. She read the casualty estimate once. Then again, her hands went numb. 11 million people. Not a colony. A civilization node. She leaned against the bulkhead, sliding slowly to the floor as images began flooding public channels. Last transmissions, half-recorded messages, thermal bloom reconstructions. Her breath came in short bursts. This was the moment she had been afraid of. The point where grief stopped being steady and became sharp. Where anger started looking like something easier. Around her, the crew gathered in silence. No one spoke. No one gave orders. For 3 hours, human space held still. Then the Earth Memorial broadcast began. A single stage. No national symbols. No political insignia. Representatives from every major region stood together. Governments that had been negotiating trade disputes days earlier. Factions that had spent years in diplomatic conflict. The speaker was not a military officer. She was a logistics coordinator from Helios Delta, recovered from an off-system transit convoy. Her voice shook at first. They thought this would stop us. The global feed showed casualty projections updating behind her. They thought we would choose survival over each other. She took a breath. They're wrong. Across Earth, systems came back online, but not to normal operations. Mobilization indicators surged to levels never recorded. Volunteer registrations exceeded processing capacity within minutes. Industrial conversion requests multiplied faster than authorization systems could approve. On the Galactic Intelligence Consortium, observers reacted with alarm. The raw collective pulsed urgent concern. Human emotional response indicates instability. Probability of retaliatory escalation increasing. A pelagic historian dimmed its lights. Recommend distancing from human alliances. Several neutral species began quietly withdrawing diplomatic personnel from joint facilities. They misunderstood three things at once. First, they assumed human unity meant centralized war control. Second, they interpreted the memorial shutdown as preparation for vengeance rather than coordination. Third, they believed escalation meant weapon development. They were wrong. Human production increases were not focused on weapons. They were focused on logistics, transport capacity, repair infrastructure, communication bandwidth. Humans were not preparing to destroy the Dominion. They were preparing to endure it. But from outside, the surge looked like something else entirely. On Aurora, 17, Maya stood alone at the observation window hours after the broadcast. The anger was still there. Hot. Heavy. She imagined Dominion worlds. Dominion cities. Dominion civilians who had no idea what their leaders had just done. For a moment, the thought of making them feel the same loss felt justified. That scared her more than the grief. Because that wasn't why they were fighting. Behind her, the ship's systems chimed. Incoming civilian convoy requests escort assistance. Work. She wiped her eyes and turned back toward the engineering deck. At the consortium, Archivist Thrin watched the Helios Delta data arrive. Casualty curves. Energy signatures. Confirmation of stellar ignition deployment. He closed his eyes. There was a threshold in every historical case. A moment when human resistance changed character, not becoming more violent, but more unified, more efficient, more irreversible. He overlaid the new data onto the collapse projections for the Fourth Dominion. The curve shifted. Steeper. Faster. Earlier onset. A quiet notification appeared. Empire integrity risk. Critical. Thrin opened a private channel to the Lethari observer. They've done it, he said. Done what? Thrin looked at the human mobilization graphs climbing across half the galaxy. They crossed the line that makes humans stop thinking about winning. He paused. And start thinking about finishing. The first failure did not look like an attack. In the capital system of the Fourth Dominion, Emperor Kral was reviewing fleet readiness projections when the economic display beside his throne flickered. Trade settlement latency, plus 3.2%. Minor. Correctable. Then the planetary resource exchange stalled. Then the intersystem clearing network delayed. Then the Central Treasury AI requested manual verification for routine transfers. Kral leaned forward as warning indicators began appearing across multiple sectors. Report. Across the Empire, ships were requesting fuel authorization that never arrived. Cargo contracts entered dispute status automatically when payment confirmation failed. Autonomous freight systems paused rather than risk unverified delivery. Within 40 minutes, economic traffic across 12 core worlds slowed to a crawl. There had been no strike, no explosions, no fleet engagement. Yet the Empire had begun to hesitate. In human space, the operation had a name. Operation Ashfall. At Earth Defense Coordination, the command room looked less like a war center and more like a financial exchange during a market crash. Economists argued over bandwidth allocation with cybersecurity teams. Logistics coordinators coordinated time windows with orbital mechanics specialists. Because Ashfall depended on timing, everything had to fail at once. Human infiltration teams had spent weeks inside Dominion networks, not breaking them, but learning them. Currency stabilization algorithms. Credit confidence thresholds. Risk response automation. Dominion economic AI was efficient, predictive, and rigid. It assumed that system-wide disruption was impossible. Ashfall was designed to make the impossible happen everywhere simultaneously. At 317 Coordinated Standard, civilian financial institutions across human space executed synchronized microtransactions through legitimate Dominion trade interfaces. Each transaction was valid. Each was small. Together, they created a liquidity distortion that forced Dominion Treasury AI into emergency risk mode. At the same moment, university research groups released predictive trading models into open networks, models that identified and exploited Dominion hedging behavior faster than their systems could compensate. Currency value fluctuated beyond tolerance. Automatic stabilization routines triggered, then overloaded. Across Dominion space, exchange rates began oscillating wildly. Trade stopped. Confidence collapsed. That was Phase 1. Phase 2 targeted logistics. In asteroid belts near major trade corridors, civilian miners executed pre-planned debris releases. Thousands of small, trackable objects timed to intersect with high-density navigation zones. Dominion routing AI, already operating under economic uncertainty, switched to conservative safety parameters. Transit speeds dropped. Delivery delays multiplied. Manufacturing AI, dependent on just-in-time resource delivery, began shutting down production lines to avoid waste. Phase 3 was quieter. Civilian hackers, many of them working from personal terminals, activated dormant access points seeded weeks earlier into regional governance networks. They didn't erase data. They introduced doubt. Population counts varied slightly between systems. Energy demand forecasts conflicted with historical patterns. Maintenance schedules contained subtle inconsistencies. Dominion governance AI did what it was designed to do. It escalated uncertainty to higher authority. Higher authority systems received thousands of escalation requests simultaneously. Decision latency increased. Automation paused. Across core worlds, infrastructure slowed, then stopped. On Aurora 17, Maya stood inside a converted communications bay, surrounded by portable quantum relays scavenged from 3 different ships. Her team wasn't targeting economics. They were targeting the Stellar Ignition Network. Dominion Command had moved the weapon control architecture after Helios Delta, decentralizing authorization across multiple relay nodes. Humans had found them. Maya's job was to overload the authorization consensus protocol. If the network lost synchronization, the weapon system would lock itself into permanent safety mode. But the relay they needed to access sat inside a high-security Dominion signal corridor. They couldn't hack it remotely. So they had moved a civilian ship into the corridor and were flooding the local bandwidth with authentication requests designed to mimic legitimate emergency overrides. The ship's reactor warning lights were already blinking yellow. Thermal load? Maya asked. Climbing, her tech replied. We've got maybe 6 minutes before the comm array cooks itself. Keep pushing. If the array failed early, the network would recover. If it held long enough, the consensus timer would break. Across Dominion space, stellar ignition control nodes began reporting synchronization errors. Authorization confidence dropped, then dropped again. In the capital system, Krall's tactical display lit with new alerts. Economic paralysis spreading across core sectors. Logistics gridlocked. 3 major planets reporting rolling power failures as energy distribution AI refused to operate under conflicting demand data. And now, stellar network status degraded, an officer reported. Krall rose to his full height. Enemy fleet location? There is no fleet, Majesty. At that moment, Maya's console flashed. Consensus failure detected stellar ignition network. Safety lock engaged. The communications array behind her emitted a sharp metallic crack as cooling systems failed. The ship went dark for half a second before emergency power restored minimal systems. They had lost the relay, but the network stayed locked. Maya leaned back against the console, shaking. Multiple human systems were now safe. On the Dominion capital world, night fell early. Power grids shut down across entire continents when energy balancing AI entered protective standby. Orbital traffic froze as navigation authority failed. Military fleets reported fuel rationing due to unresolved treasury authorization. Communication delays stretched from seconds to minutes, then hours. No battles. No bombardments, just silence spreading through the Empire's nervous system. At the Galactic Intelligence Consortium, the collapse curves updated in real time. Projected military losses remained minimal. Projected governance failure crossed the irrecoverable threshold. In a private channel, the Council demanded explanation. Archivist Thren stepped forward. They did not destroy your fleet, he said. On the central display, Dominion ships appeared, intact, armed, operational. But stranded, fuel restricted, orders delayed, supply chains frozen. Thren looked at the widening dark across the Dominion's core worlds. They removed your ability to be an empire. The surrender did not arrive as a declaration of defeat. It arrived as silence. Across the former core worlds of the Fourth Dominion, central authority simply stopped answering. Treasury networks never recovered. Inter-system governance links failed permanently. Sector commanders, unable to pay fleets or coordinate logistics, began issuing local autonomy directives just to keep food distribution moving. Within weeks, the Dominion map fractured into hundreds of independent systems. And then the human ships arrived. They did not come in formation. They came as convoys, cargo haulers, hospital ships, refinery tenders, agricultural platforms, power grid stabilizers. Hulls painted in different colors, owned by different companies, cooperatives, universities, charities. In orbit over Kethlor, a former Dominion citizen named Reth watched through the viewport of a darkened transit station as the first human vessel approached. No weapons deployed. Instead, its cargo bays opened, releasing modular reactor units and atmospheric processors. Station power returned 37 minutes later. Public channels translated the human message automatically. Emergency infrastructure support available. No governance changes required. Local authority remains in place. Reth stared at the text. Why? Someone asked beside him. No one had an answer. Across former Dominion space, the same pattern repeated. Human engineers worked alongside local technicians. Supply chains restarted. Medical shipments arrived without military escort. Data networks came back online using open standard systems that any planet could maintain independently. There were no occupation flags, no tribute demands, just repair schedules. On Aurora 17, now operating as part of a reconstruction fleet, Maya stood inside a mobile fabrication bay as a group of former Dominion engineers examined a power distribution module. It's decentralized, one of them said slowly. There is no central control authority. Maya nodded. If a node fails, the rest keeps running. The engineer hesitated. But then, who commands it? No one, she said. Everyone who maintains a piece of it. The idea clearly unsettled him. Human reconstruction protocols avoided one thing deliberately: dependency. Power grids were modular. Communication networks were open source. Supply systems were designed to function locally if interstellar trade collapsed again. It wasn't charity. It was insurance. Because every system rebuilt this way was one less system that could be turned into a centralized weapon. Not all work was gentle. Parallel to the reconstruction convoys, investigative teams arrived. Evidence archives. Command logs. Authorization chains. The stellar ignition deployment left a paper trail. War crime tribunals formed quickly, not under human military authority, but through joint local councils supported by human legal infrastructure and translation systems. The message was consistent. Responsibility would be individual, not collective. In a secured holding facility on a neutral station, Admiral Vare waited for his hearing. He had prepared himself for execution. When the door opened, the person who entered was not a soldier. It was Maya. She still wore a civilian engineering uniform, sleeves rolled, grease stains along one cuff. For a long moment, neither spoke. You commanded the strike, she said finally. Yes. Vare held her gaze. If this is interrogation, I will cooperate. It's not. She placed a tablet on the table. It displayed the reconstruction progress of several former Dominion systems. Power restored. Food production stabilizing. Civilian casualty curves dropping. Vare looked at it, confused. You destroyed our empire, he said. Why rebuild it? We didn't destroy your people, Maya replied. He searched her expression for anger, for accusation. There was grief there. And exhaustion, but not hatred. You expect loyalty? He asked. No. Submission? No. He frowned. Then what is this? Maya leaned back slightly. Winning isn't revenge, she said quietly. It's making sure this never happens again. Vare studied the data again. Decentralized systems. Local autonomy. Infrastructure that could not be easily centralized for war. Slowly he understood. They weren't rebuilding the Dominion. They were making sure nothing like it could exist again. At the Galactic Intelligence Consortium, Archivist Thren finalized the conflict record. The classification took longer than expected. There had been combat losses, certainly. Civilian deaths. Economic devastation. Entire regions destabilized. But the decisive phase had not been military. He entered the final summary. Conflict outcome. Governance collapse via distributed civilian action primary mechanism. Economic, logistical, and structural destabilization post-conflict phase. Reconstruction without territorial annexation. He paused before adding the final note. This is the first recorded interstellar war resolved primarily through systemic failure rather than battlefield defeat. Around him, the consortium displays showed former Dominion systems stabilizing one by one. Not conquered. Changed. Thren sealed the archive. For the first time since the war began, the collapse projections had stopped updating. The empire was gone. The people remained. And the systems replacing it were far harder to turn into a weapon again. The doctrine was passed without debate. In the central chamber of the Galactic Council, voting sigils lit in sequence. Methane pulses, light pattern affirmations, electromagnetic acknowledgments. Species that had argued for centuries over border disputes and trade tariffs recorded unanimous agreement in less than 6 minutes. The text appeared in the shared archive. Human engagement protocol: conflict with humanity constitutes total systemic risk. Projected outcomes include economic destabilization, governance fragmentation, and long-term structural loss independent of military victory conditions. The chamber remained quiet long after the vote closed. No one celebrated. The models displayed beside the resolution told the story clearly. The Fourth Dominion had not lost a war in the traditional sense. It had ceased functioning. Across former Dominion territory, star maps changed slowly, then faster. Central authority markers vanished. In their place, new identifiers appeared: local cooperatives, regional councils, trade collectives. And then a new layer began spreading between them. Human Cooperative Network. Open access node available. No membership requirement. No security treaty. Just shared logistics standards, open communication protocols, and decentralized trade clearing that any system could join or leave without penalty. Many did. Not because humans demanded it. Because it worked. Cargo moved faster. Resource shortages balanced automatically. Power grid software adapted itself to local conditions instead of enforcing a central model. The network didn't look like an empire. It looked like infrastructure. And it kept growing. At a university world in the Pelagic territories, a lecture hall filled with students watching archived human emergency coordination footage. On another world, a machine symbiote collective ran simulations of decentralized governance models based on human municipal systems. The Ra Collective, once critical of human emotional volatility, now studied human grief response patterns as a form of adaptive resilience. The misunderstandings were fading. Humans were not chaotic. They were flexible. They were not aggressive. They were persistent. In a cultural exchange facility orbiting a former Dominion world, a group of alien administrators sat across from human logistics coordinators. "Where is your central authority for this network?" one asked. "There isn't one," the human replied. "Then who ensures compliance?" "Everyone who benefits from it." The answer still sounded strange. But the shipment arrival data on the screen spoke for itself. Not everything improved. Some former Dominion systems resisted decentralization, fragmenting into competing factions. A few regions rejected human standards entirely, preferring isolation over change. Piracy increased along certain trade edges. Old power structures tried, quietly, to rebuild. The galaxy was more stable. It was also more complicated. In the archives of the Galactic Intelligence Consortium, Archivist Thren prepared a final broadcast classification. Not a report. A warning. The message would be accessible to any species conducting long-term strategic research on humanity. He reviewed the summary one last time. Conflict data, collapse curves, reconstruction timelines, cultural adaptation patterns. The conclusion was simple. He began recording. Humanity does not dominate through superior force, he said. They do not rely on unified command, technological advantage, or strategic predictability. Behind him, the display showed the rise and fall of the Fourth Dominion in compressed time. Expansion, confidence, disruption, silence. They are not the strongest species. He paused, remembering the council chamber. The warnings ignored. The assumptions made. They are the hardest to stop once they decide something must change. The archive sealed. Across the galaxy, the Human Cooperative Network added another node. In the Helios Delta system, the new star had not replaced the old one. Instead, Orbital mirrors and fusion arrays now provided artificial daylight to the surviving habitats. The system would never be what it had been, but it was alive again. On a maintenance platform overlooking the rebuilt orbital grid, Maya Alvarez stood with her helmet tucked under one arm. Below her, hundreds of ships moved in coordinated patterns, human, former Dominion, and several species that had joined the reconstruction effort months after the war ended. A nearby relay tower flashed green. System status, full operational capacity. For a long moment, she just watched the traffic flow. Different designs, different languages, same protocols, same network. Someone beside her asked quietly, "Did we win?" Maya thought about the colony that was gone. Helios Delta. The people who hadn't come back. About the cost. Then she looked at the system lights coming online one by one, spreading across the dark like a slow sunrise. "We don't burn empires," she said softly. Another cluster of habitats connected to the grid. Power stabilized. Communications synchronized. Trade lanes reopened.